Daniel Sports Central will be over our next team prediction of this off season, and it's going to be for the South Carolina Gamecocks, a team that was 2-8 overall in the 2020 season. Not the best season for the South Carolina team at all, as this team was one of the worst teams in the SEC last season, but there's definitely some big potential for improvement going into the 2021 season for this team, and why that is what we're going to be going over here today. We're going to get started with South Carolina's final prediction. We'll be looking at your season trends from 2020 to get things started here today. Looking back at how this team was last season, they were just very inconsistent. Once again, 2-8 was their overall record. South Carolina just was not the best team at all in the SEC last season. And of course, if you look at the notable games for this team, I mean, they kept it pretty close to Florida, 24-38, but they only got 2 wins on the season. Beat Vanderbilt 41-7, which of course Vanderbilt is a pretty terrible team. I mean, last season they were easily the worst team in the SEC, so that was a big win there. It is very important for South Carolina to win that matchup there. They also had a big upset win over Auburn, 30-22 was the final score there. So South Carolina did beat Auburn, which is a pretty impressive win. I mean, Auburn last season was a pretty good team. So overall, those 2 wins were not terrible wins for sure. I mean, those were good wins, definitely for the South Carolina team. But the 8 losses is not what this team wanted, that's for sure. But they also lost to Missouri there, 10-17. So once again, things just did not go South Carolina's way last season. But looking at your returning production going into next season, very interesting team here. I mean, you got several players in the transfer portal for South Carolina. Colin Hill, he's not going to be back for next season. He was your primary quarterback last season, as he put up 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, also a 59% completion rate. So he was the primary quarterback for this team. Of course, you had 3 quarterbacks on this roster that definitely could have started, including Colin Hill once again. Obviously, he was your main starter. Then also Luke Doty. Looks like he's going to be the primary starting quarterback going into next season. That's not for sure yet, of course. There's still a pretty significant quarterback battle going on in South Carolina right now, but it looks like Luke Doty will be the primary starter. He's had the most experience with South Carolina on this roster right now, and I think he'd probably be the best bet. But looking at him last season, he did pass 71 times, had a 60% completion rate, 405 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. So he had pretty similar stats if you're looking in comparison to Colin Hill. Ryan Helinski, he is transferred to Northwestern. Of course, he didn't play much last season at all. He actually hardly even played last season for this team. So this team did have 3 quarterbacks on the roster once again that definitely could have started, but for Ryan Helinski, it's pretty unfortunate that he couldn't play last season. But yeah, he's transferring to Northwestern, so it's going to be interesting to see how he does there in Illinois. As for the running back position, of course, you got Kevin Harris coming back, your top running back from last season. He's going to be a huge impact player, one of the best running backs in the SEC there with Kevin Harris. He put up 1,300 yards, 16 touchdowns last season. He was an outstanding player, extremely underrated as well. I definitely consider him to be a big impact player, and he's definitely probably the most talented player on this roster going into next season. Deshaun Fenwick is transferring away. He was your second running back last season in the backfield, which isn't that big of a concern. I mean, once again, with Kevin Harris, he's going to have a huge workload going into next season. I'm not all that concerned about the running back position because of him. But, yeah, Deshaun Fenwick, he's transferring away. He did have 400 yards last season, but still, even that, in comparison to Kevin Harris's nearly 1,300 yards, is not all that much. Shee Smith, your top wideout, he will not be back next season. He was a big impact player as well, putting up 630 yards last year. Nick Muse, he was your tight end last season, your top one. Played pretty well, actually, 425 yards, 1 touchdown as well. So watch out for him going into next season. He certainly is going to be also a big impact player on this offense. As for the receiving core, though, there's definitely a ton of question marks here. I mean, Shee Smith was pretty much the only receiver on this team that got a lot of attention. I mean, if you look at the other 3 receivers that even got a little bit of attention, Jalen Brooks, Xavier Legette, and also Kevin Mullins. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But, of course, if you look at those 3 wideouts there, they put up 100 yards each. So, I mean, those yards don't even compare to Shee Smith's over 630. So, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, this team is pretty inexperienced at the wideout position going into next season. That's probably the biggest concern for me on this Gamecock team going into next season. But looking at the offensive line, you lose 1 there. You also lose 1 linebacker, 2 in the secondary. So defensively, you lose 3. So I'm not really too concerned about the defense. I mean, there's still got to be a ton of improvement there if this team will be a good team or a bold team next season. But offensively, there are definitely a lot of question marks, and the quarterback position is definitely one of them. Running back position, I'm not too concerned about, but once again, it just all comes down to that quarterback position. That's definitely the most significant position, obviously, on any team, for most teams for that matter. And I think for Luke Doty, of course, he's gonna have to play really well for this team if they're gonna make it to a bowl next season. I mean, for South Carolina, you got to remember too, this team was just 2-8 last season. This team was pretty much at the bottom of the SEC, and so they've got a lot of room to improve, but they've got to really capitalize on that. I mean, this team has got a very important season coming up here, just because of that reason. I mean, 2-8, of course, is a pretty bad situation. So South Carolina going into next season definitely has got not a lot of expectation, and maybe this team could use that to their advantage. But potential bowl season in 2021. I'd say that's going to heavily depend on how this team is offensively. I mean, defensively, this team is okay. Definitely not great, but they're all right. But offensively, that's really where I think this team is going to be, or how good this team is going to definitely depend on how they are offensively. If the offense is just a mess, this team is going to have a tough time even getting up to 5 wins. But looking at your schedule going to next season, of course, start off the season against Eastern Illinois. You got East Carolina after that on the road. You also got a road trip to Georgia there in your third matchup. That is going to be a brutal game there. Georgia next season, I really think, is going to be one of the best teams in the nation. Definitely a huge SEC contender there as well. You got Kentucky at home, Troy at home as well. You got Tennessee on the road, Vanderbilt at home, Texas A&M, tough one there on the road. You got Florida at home, though, the next week after your bye. And then you got Missouri on the road, Auburn at home, and then Clemson to finish out the season. So you've just got a brutal schedule. I mean, having Clemson, having to play them every season for South Carolina right now, that is just a terrible and just a brutal matchup for this team. Because, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, South Carolina and Clemson, if South Carolina was a good team, it would be a great matchup. I mean, an SEC versus an ACC matchup, it'd be outstanding. But Clemson is just a out of the ordinary ACC team right now. And I think, I mean, having to play them every single season is not doing much of a favor to the South Carolina team as they're trying to rebuild right now. But, of course, if you look at November in general, that is going to be a brutal month. I mean, Florida, Missouri, Auburn, and Clemson, all 4 of those teams definitely could be ranked in those matchups next season. Definitely, I'd say October is going to be a crucial month in determining how this team is next season. I mean, Troy, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, all 3 of those games are winnable. So you gotta win at least 2 of those 3 for sure if you want to have any chance of making it to a bowl game next season. But looking at September here, Eastern Illinois can be a win. East Carolina, I'm going to say that's a close one just because it's on the road. But I'm going to take South Carolina there. I think this team just is overall a better team than East Carolina. So you're going to start the season 2-0, but then you got a road trip to Georgia. Brutal game there. I mean, Georgia next season with JT Daniels, I could see them being definitely one of the best teams in the nation. Huge national contender potentially. So I think Georgia gets the win. Kentucky, also a matchup that's definitely winnable, I think, for South Carolina. But I think Kentucky pulls it out in the end. But I definitely could see that game going either way. So you'll be 2-2 heading out of your September. Not a terrible situation, but then, of course, you got your crucial month of October. Troy's going to be a win, but Tennessee, I can see Tennessee also being a winnable matchup for this South Carolina team, but I think Tennessee does end up getting the win. Vanderbilt is going to be an easy win. Vanderbilt just is a mess right now. I mean, if you think as a South Carolina fan, I mean, if you're a South Carolina fan and you're upset about your team right now, at least you're not a Vanderbilt fan because, I mean, their football team is just horrendous right now, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of improvement for that team, at least going into next season. But then you got Texas A&M on the road. That's going to be a tough one. College Station, brutal place to play. I think Texas A&M gets the win. So you'll be 4-4 heading into your brutal November month. And, I mean, having 2 wins out of your last 4 matchups, I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean, you got to have at least 5 wins going into your November if you want to have any chance of making it to a bowl game, in my opinion. Which in your last 4 games, unfortunately, I don't have you winning either or any of those last 4 games. I mean, Florida, that's going to be a tough one. Missouri's going to be a tough one on the road. I actually like Missouri quite a bit going to next season. Auburn, that's going to be a tough one as well. Auburn's probably the most winnable one, I'd say, of those 4, just because South Carolina's got them at home. Missouri, once again, is going to be a tough team, so I don't think that's going to be too winnable of a matchup. And then, of course, Clemson is also coming to town. Good thing is you do have 3 of those 4 games at home, so that does give you an advantage. But Clemson especially is just going to be a tough matchup, and I think that team with DJ Uiagalelei is going to be right back to being a big contender. So 4-8 will be a record going to next season, but I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments below on this South Carolina team. I appreciate you guys all watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you guys all later.